Welcome to Hosbrutality. My name is Stefan Zarnecki of Black Tie Tours. With me, as always, Wesley Jones of Tour Cascadia, and the man behind the camera, local artist Cole Rogers. And we are joined today by a Chicago area native, an expert on the origin, nature, and behavior of phenolic compounds in wine and grapes, I'd say, a former, and I shit you not, assistant to the ringmaster in Barnum and Bailey Circus. We'll get there. And owner winemaker here at Eleveé Winegrowers, Tom Fitzpatrick. Thank you for having us up here today at your beautiful tasting room.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. First off, you have a beautiful wine to pour us to start off, right?
Yes.
Are we going to do red first or
We'll do
white
red
first?
first.
Red first.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah,
get it
you
going.
wanna do it?
Yep, hit
Yeah.
us with it. What are we drinking here?
So we're going to start with our estate, Eleveé Vineyard Estate 2018. I'll just kind of, let me do this here. And this is kind of where we're sitting here. So this is Eleveé Vineyard that we're sitting at, Dundee Hills. A little breeze coming through.
Yeah, the lights stayed up with that one. We almost have them anchored down well enough.
Yeah. 2018 vintage.
Okay.
We're sitting at 540 feet elevation here. This is a south slope, and we have our Jory soils here, volcanic in origin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I was hoping that the dog would come tromping through.
He can come out if.
We want to see the dog.
Yeah.
I tell everybody about four as part of like their introduction to you guys when we bring guests up here.
He's the most important person.
Mascot
here. Yeah.
Mascot. I still love the social media video of you playing with four in the vineyard because it was a side of you I'd never seen before. Just this silly dog owner, goofy side. It was wonderful. So check out their Instagram, Eleveé.
Yeah.
Just Eleveé
Just
Vineyard.
Eleveé Wines.
Eleveé Wines.
Yeah.
Down goes the camera. That's all right.
We might just leave those lights down for a while.
Yeah, we can. I guess the wind's probably not going to calm down. But
turn them off, lay them down.
all right. So Tom, let's just go right there.
Yeah.
I was prepping for the show a little bit. You know, I knew that you had a lot of experience in winemaking, both down or up in Washington, a little down in California, and of course here you make the wine at Aloro, and of course your own label. But but you gave me all these bullet points of kind of I read where you'd been. I'm like, nobody goes right into wine. Everybody does something first.
Yeah.
And I asked you what you did before, and you said, and I quote, "I spent a few years in the circus," and I thought, oh, that's a euphemism for like the rat race,
Playing the wine game, or
or
whatever,
or
restaurant life, or
finance or something.
Right.
But no,
Yeah.
you literally were in the circus.
Yeah.
How did you get in the circus, Tom?
It's a good question. So, so my true passion is the circus. My career in the wine business is kind of a fallback a little bit.
Okay.
And you could sort of think of like the ringmaster. There are a lot of parallels like between a winemaker and a ringmaster. And as an assistant to the ringmaster, maybe a bit like an assistant winemaker.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's just always been my passion.
Was it the showmanship or the animals
Yeah.
or what? Solid?
Yeah, kind of the combination of all. Yeah.
Okay, so was this in Chicago?
It was. Yeah, well, that's where I was living when I got started.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did not assistant ringmaster, assistant to the ringmaster, Dwight.
That's right.
What does the assistant to the ringmaster do?
Yeah, actually, so it's funny, maybe much like an assistant winemaker, I kind of feel like they do all the heavy lifting. So they're the ones that kind of do all the choreography for the presentation of the show. And it's really the assistant to the ringmaster that shows the ringmaster how this choreography will kind of lay out through the show, and does some of the writing, and it's really on show day that the ringmaster steps in, and gets to take all the credit for all the work that was done. But it was really the assistant to the ringmaster.
Okay. And one day you wanted to be the ringmaster, probably.
That's right. Yeah, I did.
And you stepped in the wrong pile of poop,
I
or
guess so. Yeah. And then I fell back on the the backup career, which was the wine business.
I feel like somewhere in this conversation you're going to be like, I was just messing with you, and no, it's real.
No, actually, I'm just messing with you.
God damn it! Now.
Gotcha.
Okay, Tom. Now I cannot trust a single word you say.
That's the only thing I'll say that's not true.
Okay. All right. Well, you be the judge there. Is he lying that he was lying?
Did it look like I was serious the whole time? Did
Absolutely.
You kept looking over at me.
I don't know, man. I still think you'd make a great
Ringmaster?
ringmaster.
Thanks. Yeah, the truth is I've never even been to the circus.
Okay, all right. You know what?
Stefan was so excited.
I'm so injured.
We were,
I'm so
well, you
injured.
had asked the question, what did you do before you got into wine? I mean, the truth is, like, I've spent most of my career in the wine business and as a winemaker, 19 years. And the truth is, like, my career before is not interesting. And I was like, I don't want to talk about what I did before. And I was having lunch with France, and I'm like, what? I need to come up with something better than that, you know? And she's like, how about the circus?
Uh-huh. All right, France.
She's in
we
trouble
see you.
too. God damn it. Oh well, it was a good yarn. I'll give you that. You had me.
We're gonna clip just that first part. It's going on social media, and the rest of the valley's gonna know you as a circus guy.
Yeah, we're gonna
Actually,
get it
I think
out
that'd
there.
be wonderful.
Yeah, there you go.
That sounds great. All right. Well, bummer. So, your master's thesis. I talk about this a little bit when we bring guests up, and your master's thesis on the phenolic characteristics and things like that. So, I obviously am not the person to explain it. Can you explain it to me?
Yeah.
As if I was like 10.
Yeah. So do you know? Have you heard of phenolic compounds?
Yes, but I would.
Do you
I'm
know?
10. I'm a
Yeah,
10-year-old that doesn't know.
So the polyphenols, the phenolic compounds in wines are the ones that you know of are the pigments. So the things that
Color.
that deliver color in the wines, and tannin is another that delivers kind of texture. And then there are a bunch of others, some that can be bitter, and so I worked when I was a grad student at UC Davis in a lab with a professor that was and this is all true here.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll never trust you.
You're looking at me like
it's all right though.
We're looking at France.
So it was Doug Adams, and he's a plant biochemist. And he developed an assay for measuring with the tools that any lab would have, which is a spectrophotometer, a very simple assay for measuring kind of basic phenolic compounds. It could be measured in grapes or in wines,
okay.
And it ended up being called the Adams assay, and so. I use that to analyze kind of the phenolic composition of grapes and wines.
Okay.
And essentially, in a nutshell, my thesis was I had about 60 vineyard sites around California, and I picked the most diverse sites that I could find. So the warmest sites, the coolest sites, the longest growing season, the shortest growing season. So I had sites from the foothills of the Sierras to just outside of the town in Napa, to the true Sonoma coast, to the central coast, basically all over California. And essentially what I had were 4 different clones of Pinot Noir on 4 different rootstocks. And fruit at harvest from each of these 60 sites that included, these clones and rootstocks.
And you planted these?
No.
They were already existing?
These are kind of full production commercial vineyards. Yep. And then I had the winemaker pull a sample 120 days post-press. And I measured the kind of the phenolic profile of the fruit, both the skins and the seeds separately, and then this wine kind of 120 days post-press. And what I would, as a young, ambitious student, I wanted to understand the influence of clone and rootstock on the phenolic profile of Pinot Noir grapes and wines, essentially, so that I would be savvy and I could know, what clones will give me what. And in the end, what I learned was that it was not like I could take a particular clone of Pinot Noir or a particular rootstock with a particular clone of Pinot Noir, and I could put them on really diverse sites, and I could get the highest levels or the lowest levels of whatever I was looking at, whether it was pigment or tannin or so I could take Dijon clone 777, and I could put it on one site and I get a certain level of pigment and tannin, and I could find another site that would give me a much higher or a much lower level of each of those.
Okay.
And so the takeaway was that environment was king, essentially.
Over clone
Over clone or
over
rootstock.
rootstock.
Yeah. So basically the environment was king. You know, the environment could kind of push, you know, kind of that composition. Which led to my interest and focus around terroir, essentially.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit about that. Your Pinots are vineyard designates.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think of. So you talked a little bit at the beginning about, you know, some of the places that I worked. You know, Washington State, California, New Zealand, and Burgundy in France. And I, after doing this kind of research with my master's thesis, felt compelled to go to Burgundy, and I spent a year working in Burgundy, kind of through a growing season.
They don't even know the clones there, right?
No, they do. Well,
I mean,
it depends on where you're at.
Yeah,
it's kind of a
field
mix.
blend or
But it's sort of the land of terroir, right?
Sure.
Like it's and you guys know what terroir is, right?
Please
Yes.
explain. I mean, yes, but for our listeners, some of them
Well, actually,
don't really drink wine.
what would you say terroir?
I'd say
is?
terroir, you know, the taste of place, but the combination of soil and climate primarily, and I guess climate is basically weather over a stretch of time. But
Yeah. No, I think it's like it's in its essence, it is this idea of the flavor of a place, essentially. So, like the definition would be the characteristic flavor imparted to a wine by the environment it was grown, essentially.
Sure.
And so the two elements of terroir are environment and the flavor associated with that environment. And I don't know, there's something like magical about that idea that a place can have a distinctive flavor, a distinctive personality that you can get to know like a person or something, you know, like year after year you see these characteristics that you come to learn and love in a particular wine that's made from grapes grown on a particular site.
Right. Now, as a farmer, is that something? And there it goes. We're losing our lights left and right.
It's all right. Cole's on it.
Is that is that terroir something that you can coax and bring out or magnify in a place by using really specific farming techniques or caring for your place at a higher level? Or are you going to get something, say, if you had a commercial vineyard right next to a boutique winemaker's home where the most intimate care is being taken care of?
Yeah, my perspective on it is you know, when you talk about terroir, you're talking about the influence of environment on the composition of grapes, and then ultimately on the wines made from those grapes. And so, you know, kind of included in this idea of environment, and there's always this debate about this, but I'm not sure I understand why. Included in environment really is anything that influence any environmental influence on these vines and the composition of that fruit, and included in that are the things that you think of, like soil, climate, mesoclimate, microclimate, elevation, the aspect of the slope, but also are the decisions of the farmer. So I include that in terroir, so it has an influence. The decisions that I make on how to manage the canopy of the vines, and that's kind of a big one. It influences the environment. It certainly influences the microclimate, and so to me that's a variable of terroir. So that has an influence. I like to think that a site with its soils and its climate, mesoclimate, microclimate, and the elevation and the aspect of a slope are big enough drivers that to some degree it can kind of overcome the decisions that I would make as a farmer. I like to think that that's the case, but maybe not necessarily.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if that kind of
Okay,
answers.
one more geeky question.
Yeah,
at
yeah.
least. We'll
Let's
go
do
more
it.
geeky. What's more important, the soil or the mother rock?
I mean, they're related, right?
Yes.
Like the soil tends to be kind of decomposed parent material. So I think they're kind of one and the same. I feel like.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not really an answer. No, I'm just kidding. I know a winemaker who would
Yeah.
say this is more important, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, no, I would say there's a relationship.
sure.
Some exceptions, and on the second wine, there might be a little bit of an exception because the upper horizons of soil aren't related to the parent material necessarily. Whereas with Eleveé Vineyard, much of the upper horizons are decomposed basalt.
Right.
So there are some exceptions to that, but
interesting.
but the rooting of the vines, like a lot of the mineral nutrient uptake of water is within a much shallower zone than a lot of people talk about or think about. There are tap roots that go deeper, and there's kind of access to other things, but a lot of what a vine is getting is within, 2 to 4 feet kind of from the surface of the soil.
Interesting. Tell us a little bit more about your site. I think you purchased in 08?
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So this actually was so my wife and I moved to Oregon in 2007 after finishing up in France, in Burgundy. And we showed up in Oregon with this vision to do something of our own. And as we've been talking about, it was something focused around terroir. And we were very familiar with wines made from the Dundee Hills. And came out, and of course you realize like Dundee Hills kind of properties are the most expensive in the valley.
Yeah.
So that was kind of out.
You like the filet mignon? You like the filet
That's
mignon?
right. Yeah, that's true. So that was kind of out, and we were kind of poking around, after we arrived, looking for a property. We had actually made an offer on a property out in the Yamhill Carlton AVA. And long story short, it was a 25-acre property. Long story short, the soils weren't what we thought they were, and so we backed out of the deal. And within a few weeks, I was looking at listings. There are folks that specialize in kind of vineyard properties. And so this is in 2007. I'm looking through, and you're like 2 million, 4 million, 8 million. And then there was one that was under $1 million, which is kind of
Bargain.
Like,
Hey, it's like going right to the discount rack.
But it was Dundee Hills, and it was what's wrong with this?
Yeah.
And what we realized, it was a very small acreage property. And it was kind of I think it was, they didn't indicate whose property it was or what it was, right? Like you had to sign a non-disclosure, sort of. And we found out what the site was, and it was a site that I was familiar with. I had the wines from it. It was a site that was planted by Archery Summit back in 1998. And Gary Andrus, the gentleman that had started Archery Summit, when he left the organization, kept this property. He went on to start another winery. And then when he was kind of finished and he was kind of selling this off, we kind of stumbled into it. We were familiar with it. And it seemed like a great place to start off with this thing we wanted to do with terroir, because I think the Dundee Hills is an important, it's an important place and an important, I'll say, kind of personality within the kind of lineup of personalities from the valley here, especially from the north end of the Willamette Valley. And so we scrimped and saved and kind of moved into this house that was a tear down essentially, and got to work fixing it up.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful property.
Thank you.
It's
very
incredible.
much. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what were you drinking when you were in? You're in Burgundy. You're thinking about coming to Oregon. Who are you drinking? What are you doing to familiarize your palate with the Dundee Hills? Is there anyone that stands out where you're like this?
Oh, that's
This is-
interesting. Yeah, I think just kind of the usual suspects. So, Domaine Druon, Archery Summit. Yeah. I think some of the usual suspects. This is kind of before some of the newer projects that have kind of popped up in the last 15 years or so. I mean, those are two that come to mind in particular. Yeah.
Now, one of the conversations I have a lot of times with folks that we're hosting is that not every winemaker owns every vineyard site that they're harvesting fruit from, or it's making their way into their production. And there's a couple of different ways you can do it, right? You can have complete control over the farming mechanism. You can just buy the fruit.
Yep.
But one of the things that always shocks folks is how expensive in their mind a ton of fruit is, and how widely that varies between vineyard sites, right? A Shea versus a Freedom Hill versus, and there can be a $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 difference between a ton of fruit based on location or vineyard. For a lot of our folks, since we're trending young, and there's a lot of folks that have questions like myself, how would you describe all the cost, sort of in a simple manner, that goes into why is a ton of fruit $2,500 to $6,000-$7,000 depending on vineyard site?
Cool. It's like an accounting question.
Let's go. Yeah, you're excited about this, aren't you? Give us the truth this time,
I'll
though.
kind of preface all of it first by saying that yes, like you kind of talked about how some people own all their own vineyards, some people buy all the fruit, and then there are some scenarios in between. And sort of for myself as a professional winemaker, I wish I could, but I just don't have the resources to buy all the vineyard that I would want to work with.
Right.
But even within those various camps, I feel like people handle things differently too. Like, as a vineyard owner, it's on the burden's on your shoulders to make the decisions as to how you're going to farm. And then there are certainly examples of folks that buy fruit. I don't want to say almost like it's a commodity to some extent, that, just deliver it on, let me know when it's ready and deliver it to me, and they make a wine out of it. And we've done something kind of, and other winemakers have done this as well. That's kind of special. And you'll notice in our name, Eleveé, it's Eleveé Winegrowers. And we can talk later about kind of that word wine grower, because it has kind of a very specific connotation. But essentially, like, to us, the farming decisions are winemaking decisions. The decisions that you make throughout the growing season influence the ultimate profile of the wines that you can make from it. So for us, it's been a very important thing from the beginning that we be able to direct the farming on the sites that we work with. So we have this arrangement with all of the sites that we don't own, where we have rows that are flagged as Eleveé rows. And we have kind of more of what might be like a lease arrangement, in that we pay by the acre, not by the ton. And this all allows us to make the decisions as to how the canopy is going to be managed through the growing season, how we're going to crop the vine given the specific site. We always kind of look to the owner and or the farmer for their expertise and understanding and knowing the site. But the style of wine that I might want to make might be different from the style of wine that someone else wants to make. And I think some of the decisions, there are some critical decisions in the vineyard that will influence that. So I just want to preface, before I get into my accounting analysis, just to say that, like, that there are different arrangements for how you even buy fruit, and ours are all acreage, so we pay by the acre. But you can translate this kind of acreage cost into a tonnage cost
after the fact.
And you're absolutely right. And even with the sites that we work with, there's quite a range. Like, we have a site, and I won't say which site is which, in order to not, say anything about a particular wine, but I'll say that we work with one site that is probably translates to just under 3,000 an acre, and then we work with another site that is older vine, own rooted, on very shallow soils, in a very cool, windy spot, And because these vines are own-rooted and old vine and on shallow soils, the vines bear very little fruit. I mean, we can get a ton an acre off of them. We can get a little under a ton an acre. And so that translates. We have an acreage contract, so depending on the yield, it's a rarity for it to be much above 1 3/4 acre per, or 1 3/4 ton per acre. And so this fruit is, just because of the yield we get, anywhere from 5 to 8,000 a ton. Yeah. And so, so, to talk about the drivers of price, yield.
He's guessing which one.
Yeah. Yield is, actually the one that I'm talking about isn't even on there.
Yeah. I was going to know it. I was going to know it if I saw it on here.
Secret site. So yield is huge, right?
Okay.
Like this is not a grower trying to take advantage of us. This is a grower, or I should say an owner that has a site that's just very low yielding. But some of the factors that drive these low yields are some of the factors that drive this expression that we love in the vine. So, so I think just farming costs are one that would influence, and I guess what we just talked about was yield. At Eleveé here, and if the camera could spin around, you would see that it's a pretty high density planting. So you talk about a vineyard and it's like, vineyard's a vineyard, right? Like, what does a high density planting mean? It means our rows are much closer together than a typical vineyard in the valley, and it means our vines are much closer. And so a typical spacing in the valley here gives 12 to 1,400 vines per acre. Our property here is 3,000 vines per acre. And so all of the work in the vineyard here is done by hand. And as you might imagine, if you have more than twice as many vines per acre, that handwork, there's more than twice as much handwork. So you can kind of see where I'm going, like both, yield, kind of density of the planting, which kind of drives kind of farming costs. These are all things that kind of play in.
Okay.
I'm sure there's an element that are kind of owners of vineyards that feel, that price is a reflection of quality to some extent, that are pricing their fruit at a high level because they just want to be perceived as the highest quality.
Right.
But I think for the most part, people are reasonable.
Well, I'd say your fruit from here, quality. That first one,
Thank
delicious.
you. Thank you very
Let's
much.
Let's try number 2 if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So this, and kind of what you're catching a little bit of a glimpse of here is we kind of talked about Eleveé kind of being a project focused around terroir. And so what we did with Eleveé, is we kind of scoured the valley in search of unique and distinct environments that deliver unique and distinct flavor profiles, which is kind of really almost like the definition of terroir. And it all started with Eleveé, the wine we just tasted, but kind of over the years we identified other kind of unique and distinct sites and kind of brought those into the program with these kind of acreage lease arrangements. And this is one of the others. So this is Madrona Hill Vineyard. Unlike the Eleveé Vineyard, which is the Dundee Hills, this is in the Chehalem Mountains. And unlike the Eleveé, which are Jory soils, which are volcanic in origin, Madrona Hill is our Laurelwood soils, which are loess. So a totally different type of soil. So that's kind of what this is. And so
Totally different.
We like to think of this as our kind of our study in terroir. So I'll tell you kind of what you're tasting between these two wines. They're both 2018 vintage. They're both made by me. They're both 100% Pinot Noir. They're both the same clones of Pinot Noir. So they're Dijon 777 and Pommard. And the only difference is the site where this clonal plant material is growing.
Strikingly different, I think.
There's no difference in whole cluster, barrel.
No. Yeah, I mean it's I will say with the barrels, I have kind of like a house barrel that
Sure.
that I use across all the wines. I do have little sprinklings of some other cooperage, but not enough to outweigh.
Got it.
And in fact, the winemaking is really led by this kind of focus around purity of flavor and purity of fruit, trying to achieve that so that we can really see the flavors of these sites.
So I assume that means you don't use a lot of new oak in your wines, if any at all? Or?
Yeah, we actually use some new oak, but not enough to kind of overtake the flavors from the site.
Sure.
So we've been very careful. We started with much lower levels, kind of in the earlier vintages, and have experimented with kind of slightly higher than that. But I would say in general, all of these single vineyard wines are in the kind of 25 to 35% new oak kind of range.
Same with your whites as well?
No, most of our whites, all of the whites that we make, kind of it's Riesling, white Pinot, and Rosé are all stainless.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Interesting.
Yeah.
What's the difference in the pick dates between these two?
Yeah, actually, these are closer than a couple of the other sites, which are a little bit later than these two. Madrona's a little bit later by a few days or so.
Okay.
But not as late as like Meredith Mitchell is the site we work with. That is probably the coolest of all the sites and is as much as a week to 2 weeks later. And Bjornson in the Eola Amity Hills is also later than these two sites as well.
That Bjornson vineyard backs up to the Seven Springs vineyard, correct?
It does, that's right.
Right next to it.
Yeah,
That's
that's right.
Yeah,
Beautiful site.
but I love the kind of silky dark fruit of the Madrona or Madrona?
Madrona.
Madrona, in contrast to that like bright red fruit
Right.
of the Eleveé, just classic contrast of soil type and
Right. Even the
Delicious.
depth and tannin is just totally different.
Yeah. I kind of like among our lineup of single vineyard wines, and we're still on the lookout for, what we're really interested in is identifying, dramatic sites that create dramatic expressions of Pinot. And so we just added Meredith Mitchell in 2019, which is a really dramatic expression of Pinot. And so we continue to look. But yeah, the Eleveé to me is kind of our kind of most graceful of the lineup. It's a little more mid-weight. It's very, like you mentioned, Stefan, kind of very red-fruited, floral, a little more silky in texture. Whereas the Madrona is darker fruit. It's kind of red and dark fruit to me.
wonderful
It's
texture.
fuller, kind of fuller, has more weight, fullness, more
for sure.
tannin, more structure.
Do I have time for one more nerdy question?
Let's do it.
What's one vineyard site or two vineyard sites that you don't work with the fruit, but from an academic standpoint really excite you?
Oh,
Other folks are making.
yeah.
Does anything stand out?
That's a great question. Boy, if you had asked me before 2019, I would have said Meredith Mitchell.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a really distinctive site. No, the honest truth is, like, I think if there was something like that out there, I would have some version of it.
Yeah.
Get it.
I would
You
have
get
I
it.
would have grabbed it already.
Get your hands
So are you stoked or a little hesitant about the new growth that's going on down Van Duzer, further south on the Coast Range? Are you excited about the prospect of some of the new vineyard sites that are being planted, higher elevation, really
Yeah.
heavy winds coming over?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll kind of see what it delivers. I think we've gone through now this 10 to 15 year kind of stretch of, I'll say kind of earlier starts to the growing season, and the vines have like a time clock. So once the vines wake up and start to grow with bud break, that clock starts ticking. And that means everything is going to happen sooner.
Right.
If it starts early, everything, flowering is going to be earlier, and ultimately harvest is going to be earlier. And what that's done is, excuse me, it's shifted the ripening period into an earlier part of the year rather than ripening
when the rain turns on,
rather than ripening September and October,
picking in the sun.
we're now
versus-
ripening August into September, which is kind of drier and warmer for us. And so I think that has given us an opportunity to explore sites that maybe 30 years ago would have been thought of as too inclement.
You could never ripen.
You could never
here,
ripen
you
Pinot
hear
on
that.
it.
Yeah.
Any quick peek at 2021 vintage so far? Flowering, etc., and fruit set, or
so I think we have just the type of fruit set that I like. So we had very warm, dry conditions kind of leading up, and
April was warm, right?
Yeah, it was leading up
70
to
degrees.
So we started getting flowering here, and just as things were kind of starting, we got this like front that came through. Do you remember? Like we got like an inch of rain in 24 hours or something. And so what does that mean? That means fertilization isn't quite as successful, right?
Right.
And so I think to members of your audience, you might think that might translate into something that's negative, like, oh yeah, so you don't have as successful of fertilization. That means fewer flowers turn into berries. That sounds like a bad thing. But Pinot clusters are really tight, in general. And what it translates into is a slightly looser Pinot cluster that allows more light penetration into the cluster. And I think it's a real positive for quality. So that's what we have again this year. We had it last year, and we have it again this year. So, plenty of fruit, but just a slightly looser cluster where we're going to get more light penetration.
It's going to be another perfect vintage.
I think so.
No smoke this year.
Bring it on.
No smoke.
It's almost 4th of July. Just don't.
I know. All right. We're going to move on to our Sports Minute, Tom. Love it. Great information. We could geek out way longer.
Yeah,
if we let Wesley.
Might have been too much.
Yeah,
too much geek.
Well,
Stefan's kicking me under the table.
It's all right. Yeah, I was not. That's not true. All right.
Playing footsie. What's the
Our Sports Minute. First up, ready? Hit the timer. Watch soccer. Watch soccer. There is amazing soccer going on right now. Both the Euro Cup and the Copa America have been going. Euro Cup, I want to say, is like in the quarterfinals now. The match between France and Switzerland was ridiculous. France was up 3-1, and like halfway through the second, not quarter, half or whatever, and Switzerland came roaring back, and they ended up going to penalties, and Mbappe, France's like stud striker, just booted. He couldn't put in the last penalty kick, and Switzerland won. It was a huge upset. France, they're the world champs. So anyway, and it was just thrilling. It was so much fun to watch. And the Copa America is like violence, like because those guys are like want each other's blood. So if you want to watch some like breakneck, intense soccer.
I've been watching the NBA playoffs, and it feels like watching soccer now because
All the
people
flopping.
get breathed on, and they just the theatrics of rolling on the floor.
I was gonna say you said sports, and I totally zoned out. You were like the Peanuts character.
Football, yeah.
It's gonna get even more convoluted because it's the College World Series
College
of
World
baseball,
Series. People
which is
in
important
Oregon
to me
care
and
about
like
that.
35 other people.
Hey,
Actually,
and
no,
their
there's a lot of
parents.
Oregon State fans.
Yeah, Oregon State.
Are into it. Oregon's gotten close the last couple of years. Right now it's Vanderbilt, Mississippi State.
Okay.
I was watching the old Mississippi State-Texas game that got rained out in the bottom of the ninth.
Oh, that's sad.
Woke up the next morning, they'd already played it.
What are you gonna do?
Come back, suit up, play 14 minutes of baseball, and get back on the bus. But it's good, man. You see these kids, they're just hungry. They're working hard.
Yeah, I've watched a little College World Series. It's not my.
I like it.
I prefer pro ball, but that's because I love my Phillies. So,
There's like the team camaraderie you don't get in
Right.
Major League Baseball.
some teams.
I've actually watched more baseball this year than probably most other seasons because the Padres are doing so well.
Oh.
And they're competing for the NL West right now, and with the Giants and Dodgers.
There you go. That's a tough division.
Yeah.
And actually, the East, the NL East, is really tough with the Nationals and the Mets and Phillies are all like, and I think the Braves are even decent too. DeGrom is insane.
So damn good, man.
Insane how good he is.
It's also just crazy how controversial, like everything that's happening with like pitchers being just unable to put anything on the ball, and so they have these slip balls. Like even batters are like, I don't want to get hit by a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. Like
Right. I know.
It's just that they've done such a poor job of regulating that whole controversy but guys shouldn't have been using like spider tack and like soda or whatever.
High
But
tech
you
stuff.
put a rosin bag behind the mound. Like you can't kick guys out for having rosin residue under their glove.
Yeah.
That gets
exactly.
sticky when it gets wet. Anyone who's played knows.
Well, and
If
I don't
you
remember
sweat on
which,
rosin, it gets sticky.
the Dodgers stud pitcher. I can't remember his name, but they were interviewing him like, "What do you think about all this controversy?" And he just has a baseball in his hand. He just holds it up. It's stuck to his hand. He's like, "This is rosin and sweat. Like, this is what rosin does.
Right.
Sticky has to be a part of the game. It always has been. Guys use pine tar on their bats."
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like they've handled it so poorly. It's really interesting. They're going to have to do
They
something
did
in the
not think it
offseason.
through this season.
No,
Yeah. You got to implement that stuff ahead of time.
Yeah.
Okay, good sports
That's
minute.
it.
Yeah. Wah, wah, wah.
Thanks, Tom.
Hey, is rock climbing a sport? Is
Yeah,
skiing
yeah,
a
that's
sport?
true.
Is
There we go.
skiing a
Let's talk-
sport? We need to do a special episode. I
Get
know,
him.
no.
Get him.
We
Get
need to
him.
do a special episode and debate the definition of a sport because I have very clear definition in my mind,
Yeah.
and
Do you think skiing's not a sport?
no, it is an extreme sport.
Is it skiing?
So, oh god, well, I could go on and on to this. Surfing's not a sport.
Really? You don't think surfing's a sport?
Wrestling is not a sport. Wrestling is a martial art.
Yeah, I could see that.
But anyway,
But is martial arts not
I can
a
agree with that.
sport?
no sport. I think sports are very limited.
Oh,
There's
yeah,
very
yeah.
there's very few true sports.
You think
by
sports
my
involves
definition.
team?
By my
like
definition,
a team involvement? Yeah.
All
Because
right.
tennis wouldn't be a sport otherwise. in that
we're
case.
going there. We're going there. Golf is not a sport. Okay. It involves a upper or lower body sprint of some type. It involves elaborate rules that requires a referee, and the most important thing, it requires in the origin of the sport is the sport itself, not something that you then decided to compete in, like track and field. Those are events. And dance, cheerleading, not sports. Those are arts or whatever, And I do not hold them below sports. I want to be very clear about that. They are not below. There's no hierarchy. Like that's not a sport. No, it's golf is a game to me. Golf is a game. Yeah. Those are my definitions. Happy to argue with it now or later, but.
That's an I've never heard you say that. First of all, and I've known you for like a zillion years.
Oh, I put a lot of thought into it. Clearly,
It's a good. I mean, it's a good.
Yeah, you were ready.
It's a strong, powerful. It's a strong argument.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
can't fight that.
I would
mean,
just.
I want
it's
to.
wrong, but it's a powerful argument.
because
nonetheless.
I want skiing to be a sport. I want rock climbing to be a sport.
Well, I would just say there's always going to be judging in all sports. Like for instance, there's the judgment of whether that was a catch or not, or versus the judgment of who skied the sweetest freestyle.
So in that element, obviously in skiing now there's judges or whatever, know.
I want to know what an upper
but-
body sprint is.
Okay, so like an upper body, I guess swimming would be, but swimming's not a sport, so.
I would call swimming a sport because I would say there's an objective winner in each.
No,
In each
by my definition, you started swimming. People were thrown in the ocean and they started swimming. Then they decided, oh, we're going to compete at this. Whereas like racquetball, I would call racquetball a sport because you just had to think up these rules.
Yeah.
People
Basketball.
didn't create rackets without competition, without what I mean?
No, every time you say sport, I keep zoning out. Wah, wah.
Oh, skiing, not a sport. You zoned out now? Rock climbing, not a sport. Okay, well, you guys, not my fault that Sports Minute went.
It's okay. That was worth it.
Okay, all right. We'll do an episode.
That was interesting.
Okay.
Cole and I will have a reaction to that and post it on Instagram.
Cole's,
Tommy,
I can
you're-
see the wheels turning.
Yeah.
Cole just likes to fight, so I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to the fallout
Yeah.
of
This
this.
is going to be good. All right.
But I
beautiful.
will say in the sense that I don't really care if fighting is a sport. I just still like to do it. Like whether it's I like martial arts to me has no less value because it's not a sport. But
I'm curious though, like if you don't call some of these things sports because it doesn't fit your criteria for your rules, what would you call them then?
Old name one.
Like skiing,
An extreme sport.
but sport is in that.
Right. So like surfing, extreme sport. Skateboarding, extreme sport.
Oh, that still has sport in the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a
so
sport.
it's a small subsect of your definition
Yeah.
of sports.
But I mean,
What
there are
about
the X
golf?
Games.
Like, so if skiing is an extreme sport, is golf like
Golf's
what's
a
the
game.
What's the opposite of an extreme
Golf's a game,
game? Yeah. Okay.
like bocce,
Yeah.
or something like that.
I
Yard
wonder
game.
if somebody thinks that bocce is like a sport.
I bet they do.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Curling. you know,
Curling.
like
Yeah, yeah.
no, curling's a game.
What do you
Sorry.
would you agree that like any event that's in the Olympics is sport?
Those are events.
All of them?
There's probably an exception. Well, like baseball, I think is in the Olympics
Baseball,
now.
Basketball.
You know, the traditional sports.
Soccer.
We're gonna do a whole
Controversial.
episode.
He's thought a lot about this.
I have. I
Hey,
really have.
I hope we get lots of haters so we get
All
lots
right,
of views.
brutal and beautiful. I read Portland Fire District said no fireworks this year, legal or illegal. Okay.
Which is a move I think everyone should make.
It's interesting though that you can buy fireworks in Oregon though. Isn't that interesting?
America, yeah.
Yeah.
You have a big inflatable eagle.
They should ban the stores from selling them. That would help a lot in the way into enforcing on the
So
night of
nobody
July 1st.
burns down the
I
fucking
know.
gorge again.
Yeah.
I feel like it's still going to be that thing though where there's a subset of people that are going to be like my personal expression or my freedom or I'm going to do it anyway.
But
Yeah.
here's
I
something
know.
interesting, and I didn't say this before because I want to reveal it. Mary Starrett, one of my two least favorite Yamhill County commissioners, actually posted on her social media. She the wording was something along the lines of like recommending against using fireworks this year.
Strongly.
So we actually have some agreement across party lines or whatever. Don't burn down the state.
Here's the deal. My
I like
wife's
it.
birthday is September 9th, and she told me this year, under no circumstances can there be fires on her birthday. So
Well, Jordan has spoken,
Come
and
on.
she's a redhead,
let's make Mama happy.
so we got to watch out.
Record heat this weekend was brutal.
It was indeed. Yeah.
It was 115.
Something
my
like
place.
that yesterday.
Yeah.
It was toasty.
Yeah, and there was like 3 days of 110 and above.
I'd say the worst was Sunday night when it was like I went outside at like 10 o'clock and was still like 95 degrees or
Yeah,
something fucking
yeah.
crazy like that.
It was.
It
That's
just never
stupid.
cooled down.
No. And amazingly, like no damage to the fruit.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah,
like
we were
the
gonna ask
canopy,
about that.
is there
Too
like
early,
a
right?
canopy? Would it be possible if that was sustained for a longer period for the canopy to get damaged?
Maybe.
Do you think?
know, I feel like I feel like the potential for damage is really very closely tied to kind of water status.
Okay.
I mean, the vine needs to have adequate water availability as it kind of evaporates off the surface of the tissues to be able to keep up with the heat.
Yeah.
Shading helps certainly, and we've kept all the kind of the leaves in the fruit zone to kind of shade, for now. But yeah, no, surprisingly not. I wasn't sure. 115 degrees. That's pretty
Right.
hot.
Right.
I got a bush on the side of my house that looks like I took a blowtorch to it.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, that's why I was asking. I have a pitcher plant that,
Yeah.
and apparently Tom just taught me I just wasn't watering it enough because
Well, I don't know. Different plants are different.
Well, I'm sure,
Grapevines are
Yeah.
pretty hardy.
Right.
Yeah.
well, if I was a betting man, I would probably err on the side that I wasn't watering it enough. That would be the over.
Yeah. More
Too
water would
much
have helped.
direct
maybe.
sun.
but because of the horrible heat,
We partied.
a Dayton neighbor, Casa S B&B, they put it out on social media. Hey, nobody's around. Come use the pool to industry folks. And I don't know, there were 15 people there?
Yeah, 15. We
Some-
took Mally, a
Yeah.
little 14-month-old.
Oh, that's cool.
Beautiful
Had a
little
great time.
B&B. I think they only officially have 2 rooms.
Which day did you go?
This was
Yesterday.
yesterday.
Was the water like 90 degrees?
It was
Oh,
pretty
it
warm,
was-
but it was refreshing though.
When the temperature dropped like 25 degrees in the span of an hour,
Yeah.
and it felt better to be in the water than out
Oh,
because
yeah.
the wind was.
Because it was still
Just made me
windy and
chilly.
like,
That was remarkable. I was in like you're right, in like an hour period.
Yeah.
yeah.
I went in,
difference.
it was super hot. I went in the store, I was shopping, I came back out and I was like, this is like 15 degrees cooler. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, thank God for the diurnal
The wind
shift.
shift. Well,
Diurnal
that's
swing?
Yeah.
That was that little thermal
was it?
bubble going away.
Yeah, it was a bubble.
Yeah,
Big
thermal
bubble on
dome.
top of
It
us.
wasn't
Thermal
the heat dome.
The heat dome.
The heat dome
Yeah.
got
like
popped.
Thunderdome, but
Yeah.
heat.
Yeah, let's not have any more of those.
So shout out to
weekends.
Casa S. Thanks for letting us use
Yes.
your pool. It's beautiful, and it's a
Thanks,
beautiful
guys.
spot. It's worth checking out if you're
Yeah.
coming to the valley. And
Better
want a
book now
B&B.
because
They're
they
pretty
book up
popular.
early. Pretty cool spot.
Boys, the valley opens tomorrow.
I think no restrictions.
No restrictions.
Oh, is that right?
as of tomorrow.
It is. Oh,
tomorrow.
is
To the
Wednesday.
30th.
Oh,
Tomorrow's
yeah,
the
yeah,
30th.
That's right. That's right.
And Governor Brown, she said whether we hit our
Yeah.
goal or not, the 30th.
I'm
that's
assuming
it.
she said we're never going to hit this goal, so let's just go for it.
I guess so.
That's what it
So
seemed
tomorrow I'm going to walk into chapters with no mask and
Oh,
just,
cool. Yeah.
I'll be happy to be maskless. I was in Costco maskless and somewhere else because they said, if you're vaccinated, no mask.
Right.
Oh, that's
And they had a special second person after the card check saying, "Are you vaccinated?" You say, "Yes, I am." They don't ask to see it, and then you go in. But
And they don't want to.
I think as guests coming to the valley, like, still understand we still have not enough folks working in tasting rooms. We've been, as hospitality staff, working our tails off for the last year and a half to make sure that you all could still have some semblance of normalcy. There's going
Show
to be
grace.
hiccups. There's going to be short staff days.
yeah,
There's going to be tasting
not back
rooms
to
that
normal.
still are going to ask you to wear a mask if you're unvaccinated or, whatever their rule sets are. Call ahead, do your due diligence, and be gracious. Like, all of us hospitality folks are tired. We're worn out. And don't be a butthole. Like, I think there's a lot of short-tempered folks that have been hospitable and are just going to give you a hard time if you give them a hard time.
and I think it's probably still up to the business if they want people masked
Yeah.
too. So,
Think so.
be ready for that. You
Yep.
know, and,
just be kind. Be thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's not going to kill
regardless
you.
of COVID, just be kind.
Right. Be
Don't be a
kind.
dick.
Be thoughtful.
Don't be a dick. All right. Well, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for letting us
Thank
come
you,
up
Tom.
to your
Absolutely.
beautiful site.
Did you,
Um,
did
pretty
you want to
up here.
meet 4 before you?
Oh,
We
let's
wanna
meet
meet
up.
for-
Oh yeah, we definitely want to
Yeah.
meet for.
We'll get
Can
some.
we get him out here?
Let me
We
see
can
if I
do
can
this.
get
Yeah,
on.
let's do it.
Okay,
Okay.
go. Yeah, perfect. The show.
Yeah. All on, is this on?
Yeah, that's on.
Is this on?
Go
Is this
for it.
on?
Yeah, exactly.
All I'm gonna say
Boom,
is
boom,
that
boom.
when you have a 125-pound dog that doesn't want to go anywhere he doesn't want to go, there's not much.
Forced
I
to sleep
can
in the
do
back.
to- yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
This is his bedtime. He does fall asleep at this time. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for it. Well, we got the shot. We got the stuff earlier. So
Oh, you
it'll
did.
be
Okay,
good.
good. Yeah. He's the best. He's super
We'll cut him in.
sweet. Yeah, and if I could pick him up, I would do it, but I can't.
Yeah, he's a little
Pick your battles.
beefy guy. All right. Well, come visit Tom up at Elevee. Come buy his wine because it's
Yes.
delicious.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And which, is this camera on?
Still running.
Yeah, all right.
Yep.
How
There
can
we go.
There we go.
Right. There it is. Boy, you should be in the circus. You're so good at that. You're gonna creep out our viewers. All right, if you enjoyed
Assistant
this,
to the ringmaster.
yeah.
Did you not like?
You got me. He's just like Connor. He's just like your brother. He wrote it out the whole way.
And he would have
All right.
wrote it the entire time.
Oh my God. All right, we will see you next week.
Cheers.